Good evening. You are listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. Alongside me tonight from the Great Midwest is RDV, and we are talking about the 1986 Troma classic as opposed to a 1980s canon classic. And of course, the movie I'm talking about is Class of Nuke High, which spawned many, many sequels and is a super low-budget microfilm. And it's a classic in the Troma vision as far as films goes. And RDV, before we start getting our initial thoughts, I just want to let everybody know as they're coming into a Troma film is a certain kind of film. And those themes we're going to touch on briefly. In many ways, you could almost say it's like being deliberately campy and over the top and a perfect fit for the 80s, because if you just caught this movie on one night, you'd be like, what the hell is going on with it? But it has a certain taste and style to it that if you've seen any Troma films, you recognize it. Let me ask you, had you ever seen this film before we watched it for tonight?
I've seen clips before, but I've also watched a lot of different Troma movies, so I kind of expected an idea what I was going to be getting into. And the fact it's 1986, and Troma likes to do a lot of this felt like a party movie, a comedy movie. You take out all the horror aspects, it felt like any other watch movie about the guys and the girls. They're all there, the guys trying to get laid. The girls, there's one girl, she's the prissy girl, and then she doesn't want to have sex and all that stuff. Then there's all the other girls who are floozy. Then you got the punks, and it was, like I said, it was really like, wow, this is really 80s.
Very 80s film, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's only missing members only jackets to it. But yeah, Troma films, I'll just say, as people are piling in here, generally speaking, are going to be over the top violent. I'm not going to say there's going to be a lot of it, but they're going to use practical effects and a lot of the blood guns and everything too. But what they do that adds a horror element to it at this time here in 86, if you're going out and seeing the zombie films, the parades and send more cops and all that.
Same kind of special effects.
Yes, and they look good. They look really damn good, even though it's so over the top. But it's almost like a pseudo-sexy, even though it's not hardcore raunchy, kind of light-hearted 80s thing, kind of like a Porky's in a way too. And for me, I was trying to remember when I had seen this film since the 80s, and I don't know if I had, but the lead lady was very familiar to me. And we'll touch upon what actually happens to her in the movie, because it's unbelievable. It's so over the top. But she had an interesting thing happen to her, which I'll get into later. But yeah, I'll say this and I'll hand it over to you. My initial thoughts are, if you like this kind of schlock, if you want to see what a midnight movie was like in the 80s, you want to feel something pretty stupid, you want some almost gratuitous TNA without anything being too hardcore or whatever, this is a movie for you. It's a Troma film. It's Toxic Avenger-like because it's the same company, but this was one of their more popular films. Like I say, it had a few sequels too. I think it's an okay watch. I think if you're going to watch it, you got to be in the right mood for it late at night, maybe under the influence of one or possibly several different legal or illegal substances. But it's a hell of a lot of fun seeing it, something like that too. It brought back some old memories. What's your initial take?
As far as this movie goes, I thought it was actually pretty well done. And every Troma movie, like I said, if you don't know what we're getting into when you go into Troma, it might really catch you off guard. You're like, wow, this is really, really out there. It looks really low budget, but it's low budget. That's so good. It still seems like these people know what they're doing. And even the story isn't that as strong, but for the 80s horror movies, the stories aren't always that great. You're there for the kills. You're there for the scares, the jump stuff. And this had the gore, and it was just like, it almost felt like almost like a spoof on every horror movie you'd see. Like, you got the nuclear power plant, the people running it, you can tell it's so fake in the background of high school. You can see in the distance, it's not really there.
It's like a matte painting. Yep.
Yeah. And it comes to people running the guy running the nuclear power plant. It's like they have a alarm goes off because one of the pipes bursts and it dumps the water. You're like, and you got this really obese, guy in there.
Calorically indulged individual.
Yeah. And he's just like, oh, we can't shut down. No. We'll be fined and we'll lose our jobs and stuff. He's like, no, just ignore it and be fine. And like I said, it's like Homer Simpson would have a better job of running a power plant than these people. And just like the whole thing, the diverse cast, when it comes to the freaks, the punks, the bad guys,
the cretins.
Oh the guy with the giant hoop in his nose ring.
Oh yeah.
And he's like a caveman thing. Yeah, and he had the actual like femur bone, like a caveman, and
Hmm.
just like it was so out there over the top, and it worked. Everything in this movie worked. It's like I wouldn't say it's a bad movie. I would say it's a gloriously bad movie on purpose, and it does well.
We had reviewed Samurai Cop 2 last week because we
No,
did the
this is way
original
better than
one.
Samurai Cop 2.
I'm going to agree with you on that, despite the fact that it was only made in 1986 dollars of 400,000 approximately
Yeah.
for the budget, and it looks like it. But here's the thing: one of the hardest things I think to get across in a movie that's shot on such a low budget, one to make it look somewhat realistic, but it's to where you can actually suspend your disbelief a little bit. So I know that a lot of the actors in here ended up being nobody, although surprisingly, if you look down the list of Troma films, there are a
Yeah.
ton of people that got their start in them. And a lot of times in the 80s, if you were just rising up, you took a small part in a film like this just to be employed. And so there is a
Hmm.
surprising good list. Marissa Tomei comes to mind. But for this movie, in the 80s, let's just kind of set the stage here as we dive in. Obviously, from the 70s, you had allegedly global cooling going on. Then there was the nuclear scare and the commie red scare, and everybody tried to make fun of Ronald Reagan because he was a Democrat turned Republican. And so there's this whole idea of the fear of nuclear energy, despite it being extremely clean and
Yeah.
successful so much so. And there's pretty much peak nuclear energy stuff where a lot of stories revolved around it. And so we get the high school that literally has the 3 Mile Island stack like in the background, like you said.
Yeah.
And when you
Yeah.
see the really disgusting goose leaking out of the ground at the high school, you're like, oh, okay.
It's like green stuff, and then you see the nerdy kid. It's like
Yeah.
he goes to take the bubbler, and he's drinking. All of a sudden, it turns green, like food coloring. I was like, and
So
it's just great. And
it is.
yeah,
You know that they're not taking themselves too seriously, but they're trying to be professional enough where you can kind of let yourself go. It was hard to do that in Samurai Cop because I didn't feel like everybody was on the same page when it came to
yes,
what they were doing. So in here, you've got your classic overexposure of the different type of people that you would see in any generic high school in the United States in the mid '80s. You had your chicks with the giant teased hair. You had a lot of spandex slash mesh. No Canadian tuxedos for our northern fellow friends listening to the show, unfortunately. But you def still did see some denim. You saw your guys with the really nice shirts and polos. The upper class guys. You saw your girls with the really bad makeup. You get your dorky guy walking in who you never liked, and he was always prominently displayed in the '80s film, who
yep,
immediately takes water from the fountain. We know it's disgusting water because there's like two little synthesizer tunes and one really extended song that you can't quite hear that they play throughout the movie, as well as some bad overdubbing. But he gets it. And it wouldn't be a comedy film unless you said to yourself, okay, what is the type of comedy being used? Is it a sight gag? Is it a running gag? Is it physical humor, which you'll have that in here? This movie, like a lot of trauma films, work on exaggeration. So the idea, of course, like you say, is that you got all these people running a nuclear plant that look stupid. They're trying to put a lid on it, not let everybody know that there might be a leak. It's right going across at the high school. The kid gets it, but then you find out that the popular team in school actually turned into these what are called cretins, your mob group, like you said, the guy with the
yep,
two giant hoops in his nose that get ripped out later because that's going to happen, and
yeah,
the girl who urinates like a man, in the
yeah,
stall, who's overly sexed, which that was a thing in '80s films, and and of course the subplot basically is this decent guy who's kind of like the lead, and his girl who's gorgeous, actually is very nice, very beautiful. We'll talk about her
yeah,
as an adult later. Um, they're wanting to go to a party because he's getting ready to go off to college and he kind of studies, and they're looking to score some weed. And
number,
so,
yeah,
unfortunately, the weed they have to get is the stash they get from the Cretans, who buys it from one of the people that works at the place. So yes, you see marijuana being grown in the top secret nuclear facility that the one
radioactive
guy
marijuana.
sells them with a really disgusting goo. Yeah, it's the same goo and fog machine. They just changed the colors, right?
Yep, yep,
And it's this disgusting synthesizer sound they play when they're picking it. And so they smoke this atomic pot,
Yeah,
And
this is where it gets the 80s thing. It's at an
it's just so weird.
indoor bikini beach party.
Oh yeah, it's a
I was
big
like,
giant
that's
club
totally
scene.
80s. Like, yeah, because Eddie, the main people is Eddie. He's the guy. He's like scored the weed. He was told by Spike, who's he's the leader of all the freaks and all. They're the ones that are selling the pot and stuff. And so Eddie goes up to his friend Warren. He's like, "Hey, dude, you got to get your girlfriend Chrissy to smoke this. She'll be super horny and stuff." It's like, and she smokes. She takes a hit, but it drops on the ground, and Eddie's freaking out. He's like, no, it's like you can't smoke it. But then she goes up like to this other like the secluded part of the place, and then Warren like gets in there, and she's all hot and bothered.
She's
So
moist. She's
basically
dripping.
he has sex with her. But then afterwards, this is where it gets very Troma. Because like how they're having these weird dreams, it gets kind of weird and gross because Warren, he starts like giving radiation burns on his face and starts getting a little nasty, and then his member grows inside his in his pants and he's in bed. You
It was
see
about a
his
6 foot
blanket,
tall erection,
yeah. He
which the
wakes up,
erection covered up with clothes or your sheet was something
yeah.
you would see in 80s films.
Yes, and then you see Chrissy's having a dream, but a more of a nightmare. All of a sudden, she's pregnant. This girl's on over, and you see this little worm stick out of her belly button, and then she wakes up.
It's
You know,
disgusting.
it's like yeah, it's like this is
It's filthy.
creature, man. And it was just like it was so messed up. I was expecting like aliens just to burst out of her, but it was a dream. But that little
Or was it?
yes, we don't know because we find out later in the bathroom she's feeling good and she pukes up in this little worm, and it looks at her as a face, and it's like the little monster from Spaceballs,
Yeah, so it gets weird because you're watching this going, okay, it's only like a 90-minute or so movie, or not even that really. It's like maybe 75, 80, but it moves at a brisk pace.
It
So
does.
all this stuff is happening pretty fast. You have a big party, and I'll just touch on this thing because there's not
Yep.
much more to it. The two guys that are his buddy, they're not trying to, have sex with his girl or steal or anything like that. In
Yeah.
the 80s, you would always have like the goofy second fiddle kind of guy that was kind of just a buddy that would be there as a part of the group, and that's what happened here. So they don't quite know what's happening to them, but the point is while we're saying this is a comedy film, the one or two scenes that we've seen so far that have these practical effects, they're really just disgusting. And yeah, they're not
Yep.
AAA effects, but they're practical. And like I say, they look really good. And if they want to go hardcore with it, like in a lot of B-level serious zombie type films, cannibal films of the 70s, 80s, it's the same level
We've
of
already seen
graphic violence.
three things of gore. The first guy, the nerdy guy, his face melts. He jumps out the window and his face deteriorates. I was like, oh, that's lovely. That's why I wanted to start off right away.
It's a great hook
I
early
know.
on. It's up there with the James Bonds.
But yeah, so because she's the thing goes in the toilet and another girl walks in the bathroom and sees and like winks at her, and then she flushes the toilet, so it's like freaks out. It goes to the sewer pipes, and it lands in the fallout base. There's a nuclear fallout shelter in this high school, but there's also a toxic waste barrel down there for whatever reason, and it falls in the monster little falls in there, and it grows to like a human size. I was like, okay, there needs to be some safety inspections in this school because
Well, it's if you think about it, you said something early on that is extremely important. In the 80s, there was a like revisitation of the 50s as far as certain things. You had
yeah,
like Leave It to Beaver getting redone, and we would say, of course, in the 2000s, people started to revisit the 80s. It's a generational thing. Although I think we're stuck on the 80s because the 90s, frankly, kind of sucked, and nobody cares about the 2000s on. But we've talked about before here on the Extreme Movie Show, especially when we did science fiction films and all that, which we dabble in occasionally, that the 50s movies that were sci-fi were based off of like, fear of atomic war or the fear of the atomic bomb. And we've talked about it with Godzilla in Japan. We've talked about the political aspect. We've talked about how there's a population control methodology that we could argue is prevalent today in politics and certain things, not to get too hardcore about it. But Troma likes to take their cue, even though this is an 80s film, It's like a 50s film, right? It's like The
Yeah,
Blob
yeah.
or Attack of the Killer Tomatoes or something. It's really kind of silly and stupid and dumb, but that's what makes it so kind of fun in a way. But then you get these scenes that are graphic and kind of disturbing because if you think about it, okay, getting the nuclear grown pod, the atomic pod as I call it, as opposed to the
Yep.
atomic punk by Van Halen. It's kind of
It's
funny,
called
80s
Atomic
thing.
High.
I know
Remember?
that's kind of cool. That's what they named it. But the thing is she gets pregnant instantaneously, goes to the toilet, and gives birth to this mutated creature, and it's like, gator or alligator or the urban myths of, well, if you flush a turtle down the toilet or an
Yeah, I know
alligator,
it.
it'll grow to inhuman size and then
Like the
terrorize the
alligators and
neighborhoods.
stuff.
It's stupid, but that's where it all kind of comes from. So you're
Yeah.
like, okay, but even in this scene here you just mentioned, where they go to investigate the leak in the school, the nuclear power plant people do,
Oh,
and you
they
get
go
the
in the
little creature
basement.
there. The guy sticks his hand in there and gets his hand ripped off. I gotta admit, I kind of laughed and chuckled when the badge flew out by itself, and then the guy's like forearm, flew out because it's so
Well,
horrible and
you saw
bad.
that one guy get pulled right into the barrel where the
Yeah,
creature was.
it was kind of creepy though. I mean,
Uh, and I agree. Like was Ash saying, the budget effects are basically the part of the charm because unlike most people, when they try to do movies on low budgets, they have no idea what they're doing. Lloyd Kaufman is a genius when it comes to this stuff. You know, the special effects, horror and stuff, making it comedy but still kind of horror as well. Richard Haynes also directed this as well. He was helping, and he was also known for the Toxic Avenger. That was his movie. He did editing on this as well, with like I guess three other movies later, like the Soft Money, Alien Space Avenger, and What Really Frightens You, which came out in 2009. But yeah, it's just funny like how you can take a low budget movie and end up making a better movie than some of these more high budget horror movies.
yeah, oh yeah. And the thing of it with it too is like you're not necessarily gonna be scared, but there's gonna be a moment or two where you're gonna be looking at it and you're gonna be like, eh. And that's the whole thing that we've talked about before, also with just 80s films, is that
And then
there's this optimism going on with stuff. There's a lot of fun things. Everybody's rah rah rah, and everything's got a cheerleader with it. But some of the better stuff that was out there was the stuff that got panned by critics because it wasn't fun. Like I think of
yeah,
John Carpenter's The Thing, or and some other films, and something like this. Everybody knows you went to the midnight movies to go see this. You
yeah.
wouldn't go see it, in the afternoon. And people would think, oh, it's an example of the 80s excess. There's no way a film company like Troma should even be making something like this. It's pure trash. It's just even cheapening what little positive press slasher films in general by now we're getting, even though zombies were still a thing and all that. And people don't seem to realize that there's these subgenres of zombie films in the 80s, and it's been going on since the 70s. And there's a lot of hardcore stuff in the 70s too, with cannibalism and the occult. So to me, the 80s were kind of light by most standards. Even
So
so, we watching this today would go, "What the
we
hell?"
haven't we haven't talked. We've been talking about the movie, what happens in the movie. We even talked about the music.
Mhm.
The music was actually good in this.
It was not bad. You can
No,
tell it was a synth score a little
the
bit, and
main
that's about
was
it.
Ethan in the coop, whatever. This guy he did Nuke 'em High, but you had the Smithereens come in there with Much Too Much. I was like, do they actually have the Smithereens?
They had some other group too. I think somebody's wearing a
Stratus
T-shirt or
and
something. Yeah,
Stormbringer.
yeah.
Yeah, like I said, it was actually kind of like a shock because it's like they actually got decent music, by people who were pretty much nobodies. But I mean, the Smithereens, though, I don't know how popular they were in the '80s, but I know they did some other songs. I think they actually didn't they do the song for Charmed?
To
Um,
that I would not know.
yeah, I think, or I'm not sure. Maybe it was. I thought it was them, but like I said, the music was just as good as the movie was.
Yeah,
And the main bad guy in here, like like just everybody, I was just looking at the bad guys, the outcasts, the punks. They were entertaining. You had a girl on there. There you got like almost a lesbian forced threesome. These two
I know.
girls. Uh,
And they're
yeah,
not wearing nice clothes either. They're wearing
no, no,
punk
no,
clothes,
no.
leather, lingerie, you name it. You did see
There
a
was
fair amount of that in high
there
school.
was one blonde. I didn't realize it was actually a girl. I thought it was a guy at first, because there was the guy with the long ponytail, with
Hmm.
the hairnet on. But then there was another blonde. I was like, wait, that's actually a girl. Holy crap! She just dressed really butch. And then, and like I said, and just the compliment that too, they threw a guy in there in the group for whatever reason. He's a preppy with like wearing a bra and had lipstick on. The gay guy. It was just like what?
And people thought we were all straight edge in the 80s. No,
No, and
no, no,
like
no,
you
no,
got the
no.
man girl who was like Spike's girlfriend. She's like she's going up to she's beating up the guys and she goes up to one Poindexter who looks like a much more nerdy version of the late Tom Petty. And he like goes up to him in the hallway. He's like, "Hey, you still owe us money for the weed we got you the other day." He's like, "Oh, I'll pay." He's like, "I want the $20 by noon." I'm like, $20, man.
When I saw her, so basically, one of the nerds is getting squeezed for some money
She
he owes
grabs
him
his
from buying
crotch and lifts
pot.
him up off the ground.
Oh yeah, and she's beating the crap out of him, and she's doing the Miss on the Top from the James Bond thing a good 15,
Yeah,
20 years
yes.
before she did with this guy, and you're like, I don't know what's
She's
going on
getting
here,
she's
but I
getting
kind of
off
like
to
it.
it too, and then she's like kissing him, and then yeah, he gets
Punches him in the nuts.
oh she takes his heel and steps on his groin when he's on the ground.
It's so stupid.
I was expecting to see a blood shot out, like a blood cannon. No,
She
nothing.
would have been your classic blonde femme fatale from the 30s, 40s,
Yep.
50s, 60s, or if you're the hardcore conspiracy theorist, your monarch butterfly programming sex doll sort of thing, honeypot, if you want to call it that, using political terms, because you're like, what? And you saw this as a side figure in some of the 80s films too, the really aggressive, sexually female that was part of a bigger group like that. And you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. So I also want to point out this movie is a free to watch on Tubi TV.
Yes.
That's why I watched it. And yeah, it's so if you haven't seen this yet, go check it out. It's free, man. Yeah, it's only 83 minutes running time.
Yeah. And the other thing with it too is that the film itself, like I say, it's kind of crazy. Basically, the third act is a little over the top too. You get a dream sequence, which is really kind of reality, where the main dude, when you see his alter ego in a way, it's almost
Yeah.
like he's the Hulk. He's got this disgusting appearance to him or whatever,
Yep.
and he's basically kind of pissed off at the Cretans, as they're called, and he hunts them down like an alley, beats
Yeah.
the shit out of them, all that, and
Through the one
he
guy.
actually punches a dude in the face and like in the mouth, and you
Oh,
see
shoved
his
it.
arm go all the way down his
Yeah, he shoved his
throat.
fist into the guy's throat and then shoved it down. I was just like, this is getting out. This is out there. It's
Yeah,
so
and this is what
crazy.
trauma would do, that would disgust you,
Yeah, I know. He
Um,
threw the main guy Spike. He threw him over the fence. He landed in the dumpster.
it's the bad guys basically end up at the high school, but this little mutated,
Well, yeah, they kidnapped
birthed
Chrissy, his
out
girlfriend. Warren,
creature
the
is
main
there
guy.
growing into this gigantic, disgusting
Yeah,
figure.
yeah.
And so they want to get back at him, so they kidnap her. And so there's this big fight at this high school. at
Yeah,
the end.
they're in the basement, and like they got like a dog leash, a choke chain around her neck,
Mhm.
around Chrissy's neck, so that she can't leave. And you see the girl is trying to make out with her, and Spike's trying to make out with her, and she bits him, and then so Warren comes there, and he's like, give my girlfriend back, and Spike pulls out this like giant knife, I forgot the proper term. It's like a dagger. It's a black one. It almost looks like the ones they use in the military.
Yep.
And he's like waving. He's like, no, I'm gonna, gonna make love to your girlfriend. I was like, I want her. Chrissy's got something I want. You have nothing I want. And then he pulls out a gun. He's getting ready to shoot Warren. And all of a sudden, the monster comes out of the barrel. The girl who was holding onto her, like gets punched through the face by the monster, and the fist goes through the back of her head. I was like, dang. Because that was like the semi decent looking hot girl that was part of the freak gang. I was like, wow, he took the one that was like the most attractive and just killed him right away. So then because the monsters out, they leave, and the bad guy is shooting the gun at the monster. Of course, he shoots the head, and you just see the yellow pus come out, and it doesn't face the monster. He's like, oh crap, and it knocks the gun out of the guy's hand. He runs up. Warren and his girlfriend are running through the high school hallways. You see the rest of the gang on motorcycles driving up and down the hallway.
Defacing it, because
Yeah.
anti-school was such a huge theme in the 80s.
Yep.
And so the movie basically ends with the school blowing up.
Oh yeah,
and the bad
because
guys dying,
how he
everybody else
defeats.
being the
Tell
same.
him how when they're in science lab how he defeats the monster.
Well, science actually almost gained some sort of mainstream near acceptance with it, because earlier in the film we saw where people were trying to hide in the hallway, and they went into the science room, and the guy's like, what's that? And the other person goes, that's a laser. And you're like, what?
He turns it on, and because the monster's got the tentacle. Because basically, the monster, if you don't realize at this point, the monster is actually their love child, Warren and Chrissy's mutated love child.
Mm-hmm.
When they smoke, and it's going after wants Chrissy, and it's got its tentacle wrapped around her waist. And so Warren turns on the laser, holds it up like a gun, and then you just see that the most crappiest like laser CG, and it just. The monster starts glowing orange, and it's getting ready to explode. And he grabs Chrissy. They run out of school. Here comes the guy head of the power plant. He's like, "What's going on?" It's like, and they're like, "Run, get out!" He's like, he stays there. He walks in the science lab, sees the monster, and screams, and the whole place blows up. And then there's an announcement saying like, "Well, due to the school be destroyed, the school will be closed until further notice." And everybody in the crowd is just kind of like they're stunned, but then they start cheering because school's closed.
Yeah.
It was just like
we knew back then school sucked.
I know, but it was so funny because they did that, because normal people would just be running, oh my god, flame, but that's what it was. I was such a cheesy but still entertaining. And I mean, I don't think we talked about Toxic Avenger on this channel yet.
Not yet.
No, but we've talked about it in our top 10s.
Yes,
we did a couple years ago. But yeah, Coffin has a way of making entertaining characters, and I can't wait till we talk about the Toxic Avenger movie, because my first introduction to that movie was after I grew up watching the cartoon that was on ABC or something like that, which was a totally much different Toxic Avenger, where he's a superhero and he's friendly. So it's like I said. So that was my first Troma movie was Toxic Avenger. So I can't wait till we talk about that.
One of the things I like about this film a lot is, like I say, it's hard to kind of get to a point where you suspend your disbelief. And even though it's real cheesy, and the acting's not A level, it's not where a lot of people are breaking character, or one or two people are so bad or so good that they make everybody else look different, so it's easy to kind of get sucked in for the level of entertainment that it was. But again, the violence and disgusting parts of this film, we get it early on, which technically it's a self-harm sequence, if you want to call it that.
Honestly,
avoid the S word.
I would say the acting in this movie is none any better than watching One Crazy Summer with John Cusack and Demi Moore.
I would not know how to compare that because I haven't seen it, but I will say that.
Well, they say look at all the side characters and how they act. It's exactly how the people act in that beach party.
Well, this movie has a lot of themes that, like I say, make it a good watch, because you have a lot of things in there. Some of them mentioned, I just want to touch on them again. In the 80s, you had anti-school as a theme, definitely, and from the students' perspective, students were
smoking,
wanting to get on their own. Yeah. Absolutely. You could argue that this film is don't have sexual relations until you're married.
We forgot to talk about there's another part where the bad guys had the principal held hostage, and the guy has an M16. And he blows away the secretary, just walks in there and just shoots her.
Yeah.
All because they wanted the alarm code.
Yeah. It's guns in school.
It was it was so random.
But there's a lot of other films in the 80s that had themes with high school on it too, whether it's from bullying or drugs. And I always preferred the films that had a little bit of the darker stuff with it too, because it's a bit more realistic when you're seeing it. And that's one thing about this film being such a guerrilla, low-level budget film, is that it was gross where they filmed it. I don't know where it was at, or maybe it was in New Jersey where it was set, where a lot of Troma films, the Troma universe is set. Not sure, but it wasn't a pretty high school like you would see in films like Can't Buy Me Love that are really nice, good looking. California high school when everybody's got money and stuff. And you're like,
but it did
that's
seem,
not reality.
It seemed like a normal high school though. Like it wasn't like a staged. Yeah, right. It just seemed like they just, like I said, it's low budget. So let's go with the most realistic. Let's go with what your school looks like, and we'll just film in there.
You had your dopey buddy friends. You had your drug dealer. You could argue that
you had your floozy girls. You had the freaks, and you had all the dweebs and stuff. So diverse,
The main guy that's the proper
diversity.
He was really trying to go to college. That was a theme in the 80s too.
You want the correct diverse cast, not what they do today with the woke movies. Your diverse cast was this back then. Your freaks and geeks. That's what you had, and you had the jocks. And then you had the adults, and you had the delinquents. That was your diversity, and that's all you needed in a movie.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to kind of close up with something because it kind of come full circle. And I'd watched this movie a couple hours ago, like after
Hmm.
lunch, and I was like, okay, it's been forever since I had seen this, but I knew that it had some sequels, and I knew about some other people and stuff like that. And there's a lot of big names currently in television and or movies that have some sort of relationship with it. We're not going to go down the rabbit hole too much with that, but I want to talk a little bit about the main girl. So let me ask you. I thought, especially even considering the 80s style, had a lot of the one pieces or whatever like that. Very beautiful woman, naturally
Janelle
beautiful.
Brady is the actress, and yes, she only did one movie other than this.
Two others.
Yeah, two others, yeah, but not, but yeah, but she must have quit acting, or she just didn't get any callbacks. But yeah, very believable as as the girl who just basically doesn't want to be where the loud parties are. She just wants to have a quiet night. You know, very yeah, introvert. Warren and Gil Brenton as Warren, as the jock, but he's also respectful to to her and stuff. He's not like his buddy. What was his buddy Eddie? Yeah, was the one that was crazy. Just wanted he was basically like the booger of the movie.
Yeah,
From the
Booger was
Nerds.
was an important
Yeah,
guy in the 80s.
and
Yeah,
that's what this
absolutely.
character Eddie reminded me of. He'd be like Booger. Let's party. Let's get laid.
Yeah,
Drink
and
beer.
that's all it is. It's simple, it's basic, and there's nothing
Yep.
harmful about it. It's nothing whatever. It's just, how can we, do what people want to do and not be ashamed of wanting to do it. But this lady, Janelle Brady, um, very naturally good looking girl, nice body, tons of boobies in this movie, which and they're natural, of course. I remember as I started researching her a little bit because I'm like, what have I seen her else in? I think she was in Teen Wolf 2,
Yep.
unfortunately.
That was their big
Um,
break.
well,
But
I remember Jason Bateman from he was in a show with this other guy that ended up being on Married with Children, and it was one season and came out in '84. So I remember seeing Teen Wolf 2 going, oh God, I don't know what's going on. But I remember her, and here's the thing: I started looking, researching her, going, has she done anything recently? And I guess one of the reasons why I thought about this a few years ago was that she's just flat out missing, apparently. And we don't try not to get too much into people's
yeah.
dirty laundry or lives or whatever. But unfortunately, she's just literally missing about maybe 10 years ago or something. She just literally disappeared off the face of the planet. And, we don't really get into it that much here on the Extreme Movie Show, but it was just kind of interesting. Where are they now? Sorts
Hmm.
of things. James Gunn has a relationship with Troma. So there's a lot of other people. Trey Parker and that group does. So there's a lot of, like I say, history there that Troma has in there. You and I have always emphasized canon classics because we're ninja crazy in the 80s, right?
Yep.
But Troma is definitely kind of like even a B-level canon sort of thing with their films. But it's an acquired taste. But if you like them, a lot of the films that way, so you know what you're going to get. And this movie delivers. I think, for my closing thoughts, it's worth definitely a watch. It's something if you go, oh, Troma, that's the one like you're saying that had Toxic Avenger or whatever else. There's a lot to see from them if you want. So there's definitely a catalog to visit with it, but
Yeah.
definitely a decent flick.
I want to point out the girl who played Taro, the one who got your face punched by the monster. She went on to do a lot more movies up until 2000. Actually, she was in Terror Firmer and then Citizen Toxie, the Toxic Avenger #4, known as her part was called the Vibrator. She must have been a villain, or I don't know. Like I said, and you see these people. They're well, I guess she's 35 now. Apparently, did not know that. I wonder how young she was in this movie.
She got to be older than that.
As I was saying,
Well,
that's
maybe not. Depends on the year it came out at, which I don't know.
yeah,
Um, well, YouTube apparently yanked the channel of Troma because they said, hey, to monetize all this crap, we're going to put it on YouTube and do a subscription. And apparently, I guess
yeah.
people with COVID started complaining about it. So they got yanked. And so it's interesting from the business perspective. You can sit there and argue about the merit of having this kind of a film, but it is a cult classic. It has been around. They have a ton of product. They even had, I think, a Stendhal syndrome and a few others. I think
Yeah.
that's a Dario Argento film whose daughter, Asia, has absolutely zero compunctions about taking her clothes off. So to me, she's like the spiritual successor of an 80s girl because she definitely has no problem using her sexuality and is comfortable with it. And that's kind of interesting, but that's another discussion for another time. But let me hand it over to you for your final thoughts here on Class of Nukem High here. What do you got for us?
I think I've as I was trying to remember this movie. I think I saw the sequels on TV once because I was thinking like I had an idea what this was, and it turned out to be totally different from what I thought it was going to be. And sadly, the sequels were not directed by Lloyd Kaufman or the other guy Haynes. Like I said, going into this, I forgot. It's been a while since I've seen a Troma movie. So when I saw like the very opening, I was like, oh, that's right. Yeah, this is Troma's like the severe gore. I'm not a huge I'm not a huge gore person. I'm more for like the happy ending stuff. And this movie had to have a happy ending. So it worked out well for me. There was a little bit of gore, but it was like the story was good. The music was good. The special effects was good. I mean, it was just enough where it's like, you know what? This is a movie you probably see on Tubi because Tubi, like, it's just like
Tubi's been a gold mine lately. I gotta say.
Yeah, this is, and I'm happy that I was able to watch it again. This movie, and other than that, I mean, check out Lloyd Kaufman's movie. Check out Troma Entertainment. Check out Toxic Avenger. Check out this movie itself and Tubi. There are so many good movies that people talk about. It's always Halloween or Jason, but nobody talks about the Troma movies because that's
like nobody talks about the Exterminator or other stuff in the 80s that you'd only get to see late at night, like this film.
This is the movie you'd go in the 50s. You'd go in the 60s. You'd go see the movie The Blob. I mean, I could see the 80s remake of The Blob with this, being like the main feature, seeing a grindhouse movie at a drive-in.
Yeah. That's what it is. It's just a B-level film. We'd go to Cosmic Concerts, go check a midnight movie out there. A bunch of guys and girls and high schoolers would go there. It was a thing to do.
Yep.
It was a place to be seen, and there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Class of Nukem High from 1986, Troma Films. Check it out. It's definitely a good watch. Much, much better than Samurai Cop 2.
And don't smoke weed because it might be radioactive.
Or if you do, just understand that actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences mean inadequate family planning. And that's our little advice for you for the day. So for RDV and everybody involved here in the Extreme Movie Show, I'd like to thank everybody for showing up and listening to Ash, Ed Brewer, etc., and others too. Have a good night always. Stay extreme, guys, gals, people, Tromaville, patients, you name it. Bye.
Extreme Tromaville.